In this video, I'm going to be forging a pretty simple form of door bolt. So it involves a little bit of hand forging, a little bit of bench work for assembling all the different parts, and unfortunately, correcting an oversight on my part. Hi, I'm Dennis Frechette, and welcome back. Today, I'm starting a series of videos on building door hardware. I need to replace a door later on this summer, so I decided to build all the hardware that I'm going to need for that. So this video, I'm starting with a pretty simple form of door bolt. The next in this series, they won't be consecutive, but the next in this series, I'll probably be starting on the actual door latch. This door is going to need to swing out. So the latch that I made a few years back, I'm not going to be able to reuse. So I'm building a totally new one, and I'm going to forge the hinges for the door as well. So that's what's coming up. Hope you enjoy it. I'm going to start by working on the back plate. This is just a piece of 14 gauge sheet metal, and you can see the faint outline of a half circle that I'm going to be cutting out of the top. So this is your classic headstone shape that you see on a lot of colonial hardware. I'm going to be using half round bar stock for the guides of this door bolt. Half round used to be really commonly available until, I don't know, the 30s or 40s or something like that. It was used a lot for repairing wagons and, farm machinery and that kind of stuff. It had a flat face that allowed it to be applied to a piece of wood and reinforced it or provided a wear surface or, it had a lot of uses, and quite often it got recycled into hardware. So that's what I'm doing today. You can't get it anymore, of course, so you have to make your own. But fortunately, we're blacksmiths and we can do that. I'm going to be using a piece of square bar for this. You can use a round bar, of course. You're just flattening the one side and the other side is round. So a round bar would work well here, but I'm using a piece of 1/2 inch square bar because it just gives me a little bit more material to work with. So the guides are going to be a little beefier, and I just like the look of that. Now that I have the bar stock that I'm going to be using for the guides all forged out, I just need to cut it to length and wrap it around the bar stock that I'm going to be using for the bolt. And finally, the last piece that I need to forge before I can start assembling this is the actual bolt. And for that, I'm going to be using a piece of 1/2 inch round bar. This door bolt is going to be mounted vertically at the base of the door, and it's going to lock into the threshold. So what I'm forging now is the longer handle that's going to stick up. It's going to allow you to operate the door bolt without having to bend right down to the ground to reach it. So that extra length is just a natural place for some kind of ornamentation. So I'm just going to be hammering out a pretty crude form of penny snub scroll and using that as a handle. The guides are going to be attached to the back plate using tenons that are cut right out of the actual material that I've used for the guides. So I'm just using a hacksaw, cutting them out to a rough shape, and then cleaning them up with a file. I'm going to be leaving the tenons on these guides square, and I'll just be drilling a hole to rough out most of the material and using a chisel to square up the hole to fit the guides. If you don't want to do all that, you can just file the tenons round to fit the drill holes. Either way is going to secure these things just fine. So here I'm a little further along and I'm ready to rivet the guide blocks to the back plate. So at this point I'm trying to work through different ideas for supporting this curved block so that I can hammer the rivet heads onto the end of the tenons. My first idea was to clamp a wood block in the vise which would support it from dropping through the vise jaws, and then the vise jaws would corral it enough to allow me to hammer the rivet heads. And that actually didn't work too bad, but it didn't support it enough to really drive the rivet heads all the way home. So I eventually decided it would be easier to just clamp the guide blocks directly in the vise and deal with any scarring later on. So that's what I did. So here I'm a little further along. I had the first guide block riveted on just fine. These things are really tough, so I was able to apply a lot of pressure to these things. They did not move one bit. I was able to rivet it down really solid, and you can see a little bit of file work from cleaning off the scarring that was left on the side of each guide block. Not a problem. The big problem is that I realized that I should have had the bolt in place before I riveted this guide block. So now my next puzzle is, what's the shortest route? So I deform the bolt, try to get it through the hole, or just tear all this apart and basically start over. So fortunately, it didn't take much to straighten out the bolt a little bit to allow it to weave its way through this guide block. So that's what I did, and we were back on track. So here I have both guide blocks in place. Everything's working fairly well, but I'm catching in a few areas. So I've taken a really slow fire and got the one guide block up to a dull red heat, and that's going to allow me to work it through and just basically, do the old medieval machining to make the pieces work. The main reason that I'm having all these problems lining this up is because I forged the guide blocks too tightly onto the shaft that I was using as a guide. I should have left a little bit more clearance and basically just swap in the whole thing that would allow for just these little, they're basically things out of alignment, and I'm sure just in thousands. I mean, there was very little work that needed to be done to get everything to line back up. So just making a little looser fit would have just eliminated all this. So here's the finished door bolt, and if you're noticing that the back plate appears to be a little narrower than what I started out with, well then you're absolutely right. My original idea was to just go with a pretty standard bolt with a rectangular stock for the bolt and just a basic bent saddle type clip that would just be fit over the bolt and rivet to the back plate, as standard as you can get. But then I decided I would go with a round shaft on the bolt, and because I like the idea of it rotating around, and I thought if I placed a pin in the back plate, I'd be able to hold the bolt in an up position while the door was open, and then rotate it around, and allowing it to drop into place. So that's where all of this got started. Now the bottom corner of the bolt where I had to grind away a little bit in order to get it to fit through that guide, suffered a little bit. It's still plenty strong. It just looks a little wimpy, so I may put some weld there when nobody's looking, just to sort of beef that corner back up a little bit and make it look like it has a nice even cross section. But other than that, I'm quite happy with how it's going to work out.